I saw my husband's car parked outside my daughter-in-law's house while my son was at work. Then I heard strange noises coming from inside. I quietly approached the window, and what I heard shocked me. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from, because this story is about to change everything I thought I knew about my family. The brake lines will snap at exactly 45 miles per hour, Patrick was saying through the window. It'll look like a mechanical failure on that curve near the lake. And the life insurance pays out immediately? That was Sabrina's voice, my sweet daughter-in-law who'd been so concerned about my well-being lately. 2.5 million, plus whatever's left in her accounts. Patrick's voice was cold, calculating. With you inheriting everything through Daniel, we can finally pay off your gambling debts and disappear together. I can't believe I let it get this bad, Sabrina said, her voice shaky. $200,000. If my parents find out, they won't. After Thursday night, all our problems disappear. My legs almost gave out beneath me. 23 years I'd spent building wealth after my first husband died, creating security for my family. And now my second husband and my son's wife were planning to murder me for it. I backed away from the window as quietly as I could, my heart pounding so loud I was sure they'd hear it. When I reached my car, I sat there for 10 minutes, hands shaking, trying to process what I'd just heard. Patrick, the man who brought me flowers every Friday, who rubbed my shoulders when I was stressed, who'd promised to love and protect me until death do us part. And Sabrina, the daughter-in-law who called me every morning to check on me, who helped me organize my medications, who'd become like the daughter I never had. They were planning to cut my brake lines. I started the engine and drove home carefully, and drove, checking my rearview mirror every few seconds. When Patrick walked through our front door 3 hours later with his usual bouquet of grocery store roses, I was ready with the performance of my life. "How was your day, sweetheart?" he asked, kissing my cheek like a loving husband. "Wonderful," I said, accepting the flowers with a smile that could have won an Oscar. Just wonderful. But inside, I was already planning their destruction. At 62, I'd survived cancer, bankruptcy, and the death of my first husband. I'd built a fortune from nothing and raised a son who was successful and kind. 2 greedy liars weren't going to be the end of Vivian Chen's story. They had no idea who they were really dealing with. The next morning, I started paying attention to details I'd been ignoring for months. How Patrick always volunteered to take my car for service. How Sabrina had been asking subtle questions about my will and insurance policies. How they both seemed very interested in my driving schedule, especially my Thursday night book club meetings. I'd married Patrick 8 months ago after Sabrina introduced us at a family barbecue. But now, everything about that introduction seemed calculated. I pulled out my laptop and started going through our joint bank account statements. What I found made my stomach turn. Small withdrawals, nothing I'd noticed day to day. $50 here, $100 there. But over 8 months, Patrick had taken nearly $12,000 from our household account. The money had been transferred to something called Morrison Consulting Services. I'd never heard of Morrison Consulting Services, but there was something else. Payments going from our account to SB Holdings every month. $500, like clockwork, since 2 months after our wedding. I researched both companies. Morrison Consulting was registered to Patrick at an address I didn't recognize. SB Holdings was registered to S. Chen, Sabrina's maiden name. She'd been taking money from me, too, through Patrick. I thought about what I'd overheard yesterday. Sabrina owing $200,000. Her gambling debts. The payments from my account suddenly made horrible sense. My phone rang. Daniel's number. "Hi, Mom. How are you feeling today?" "I'm fine." "Sweetheart, why do you ask?" "Sabrina mentioned you seemed confused yesterday when you stopped by. She's worried about you." I hadn't stopped by yesterday. I'd only been outside her window. Either Sabrina was testing to see if I'd admit to eavesdropping, or she was already building a narrative about my mental state. "I feel perfectly clear, Daniel. In fact, I've been thinking we should spend more time together. Maybe you could come over for dinner tonight." "Of course. Should I bring Sabrina?" "Actually, I was hoping it could be just us. I have some financial questions, and you know how she worries about boring business talk." After I hung up, I realized I'd made my first mistake. If Sabrina was already suspicious, asking to see Daniel alone would only make it worse. But I needed my son to understand what was happening. and I needed to do it before Thursday night. I had 2 days to save my own life. Daniel arrived for dinner looking concerned, and I knew Sabrina had been working on him. "Mom, are you feeling okay? Sabrina said you've seemed off lately." "Daniel, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Sit down." He sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd signed my marriage license to Patrick, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays as a family. "Yesterday, I saw Patrick's car at your house while you were at work. I was concerned, so I went to check on them." "Okay." "I overheard them talking about killing me, specifically about cutting my brake lines to cause an accident." Daniel's face went through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, concern. "Mom, are you sure you heard that correctly?" "I'm sure. They mentioned the insurance money and Sabrina owing gambling debts." "Gambling debts? Sabrina doesn't gamble." I pulled out the bank statements and showed him the transfers. "SB Holdings, $500 a month since 2 months after my wedding." I looked it up. "It's registered to Sabrina." Daniel studied the papers, his frown deepening. This could be for anything. Maybe she's starting a business. A business she never mentioned? That requires regular payments from my account through Patrick? I leaned forward. "Daniel, Patrick has also been taking money directly. $12,000 over 8 months. Mom, you gave him access to the household account when you got married. For groceries and utilities. Not for mysterious businesses I never agreed to fund." Daniel was quiet for a long moment, looking at the bank statements. "Even if this is theft, that doesn't mean they're planning murder." "Then explain this." I told him exactly what I'd heard through the window: the brake lines, the insurance payout, the timeline for Thursday night. "You're saying my wife wants to kill my mother for money?" "I'm saying your wife owes $200,000 and sees my death as the solution to her problems." Daniel put his head in his hands. "This is insane." "Is it? Or does it explain why she's been so interested in my finances lately? Why Patrick always insists on maintaining my car? Why they both ask so many questions about my driving habits? I don't know what to think." "Then help me find out for sure. Help me gather evidence before Thursday night." Daniel looked up at me. "What kind of evidence?" "The kind that will either prove I'm wrong and paranoid or prove I'm right and in danger. And if you're right, then we make sure they never get the chance to hurt anyone else." Daniel stared at the bank statements for another long moment. "Okay, what do you need me to do?" "First, we're going to visit my financial advisor tomorrow. I want to protect my assets and document everything we've found. And then we're going to check my car very carefully before Thursday night." "Mom, if they're really planning this, then we're going to be ready for them." Margaret Torres, my financial advisor, listened to our story with the professional calm that comes from 20 years of protecting people's money. "This is definitely financial fraud," she said, after reviewing the bank statements. "The question is what you want to do about it." "I want to protect my remaining assets and document everything for law enforcement." "I can help with both." Margaret pulled out several forms. "We'll freeze the accounts Patrick has access to, move money into protected trusts, and set up monitoring alerts for any unusual activity." "What about the money they've already taken?" "We can trace it and potentially recover it, but that will require police involvement." After an hour of paperwork, my assets were locked down tight. Margaret also prepared a comprehensive report of all the suspicious transactions. "If something happens to you, this report goes immediately to the police and the insurance company," she explained. "They'll know exactly where to look for evidence of fraud." Our next stop was the police station. Detective Sarah Chen listened to our story and examined the financial evidence. "Mrs. Morrison, this is definitely elder financial abuse. We can start an investigation immediately." "I appreciate that, but I'd like you to wait." "Wait? Why?" "Because if they're really planning to kill me Thursday night, I want to catch them in the act. If you arrest Patrick for theft now, we'll never prove the attempted murder." Detective Chen frowned. "Mrs. Morrison, that's extremely dangerous." "It's strategic, but I want all this evidence on file now, so if something happens, we'll know exactly who's responsible." Detective Chen made copies of everything. "But I'm going to have patrol cars in your neighborhood Thursday night, whether you want them or not." That afternoon, Daniel and I went to my mechanic, Joe Martinez, who'd been servicing my cars for 15 years. "Joe, I need you to check my brake lines very carefully. I think someone might have tampered with them." Joe looked confused but thorough. After 20 minutes under my car, he emerged, shaking his head. "Brake lines look fine now, Mrs. Morrison. But see these scratches on the mounting bracket? Someone's been under here recently with tools." "Someone other than you?" "Definitely. And Mrs. Morrison? Whoever it was knew what they were doing. These marks show they were practicing, figuring out the best way to make a cut that would fail under pressure." Daniel and I exchanged a look. "Practicing?" "Yeah, like they wanted to make sure they got it right when it mattered." On the drive home, Daniel was unusually quiet. "You believe me now?" I asked. "I'm starting to. But Mom, if they're really planning this for tomorrow night we're going to be ready for them." "How?" "By making sure they think their plan is working perfectly right up until the moment it backfires on them." Thursday morning, Patrick was unusually attentive. "Are you sure you want to go to book club tonight, sweetheart? The weather forecast looks rough." I glanced outside at the perfectly clear sky. "Oh, I wouldn't miss it. We're discussing my favorite novel. Maybe I could drive you?" "That's sweet, but you'd be bored. Besides, I like driving at night. It makes me feel independent." Patrick's smile seemed forced. "Of course, just be extra careful on those lake roads." After he left for his morning errands, I immediately called Daniel. "He's definitely planning something for tonight. Can you get away from work early?" "Already done. What do you need me to do?" "Meet me at Joe's garage in an hour. We're going to modify my car." At the garage, Joe helped us install a backup brake system, a secondary line that would work even if the primary brakes were cut. We also installed a small camera under the car that would record anyone who tried to tamper with it. "This camera will upload footage directly to your phone," Joe explained. "If someone messes with your brakes, you'll have video evidence." "Joe, you're a lifesaver. Let's hope we don't need to test that literally." That afternoon, I made a show of parking my car in the driveway where Patrick could easily access it. I mentioned to him that I was excited about book club and might drive a little faster than usual since I was running late. "Just be careful on that curve by the lake," he said. "You know how dangerous it can be." At 5 o'clock, I went upstairs to get ready. When I came back down an hour later, Patrick was reading in the living room, looking innocent as could be. But my phone was buzzing with alerts from the camera app. The footage showed Patrick spending 15 minutes under my car with professional-grade tools, carefully cutting most of the way through the brake line, just enough that it would hold for normal driving but fail under heavy braking. Exactly what he'd described in the conversation I'd overheard. I called Daniel. "We got him. The video shows everything. Are you still going to book club?" "Absolutely, but I'll be driving very carefully and you'll be following me." "Mom, this is insane. This is justice. They tried to murder me, Daniel. Now we're going to make sure they go to prison for it. What if something goes wrong? Then at least we have evidence of who's responsible." I grabbed my purse and keys. "But nothing's going to go wrong. I've been protecting this family for too long to let a couple of amateur killers stop me now." As I backed out of the garage, I saw Patrick watching from the kitchen window. He waved cheerfully, like a loving husband seeing his wife off for an evening with friends. He had no idea he'd just been caught on camera committing attempted murder. I drove to book club at exactly 25 miles per hour, testing my primary brakes gently every few blocks. They felt spongy and uncertain, just as expected. But the backup system Joe had installed worked perfectly. At the community center, Daniel was waiting in the parking lot as planned. "How do the brakes feel?" "Compromised, just like the video showed, but the backup system is solid." We walked into book club together, where Daniel politely introduced himself to the other members before taking a seat in the back. I made sure everyone noticed him, witnesses who could confirm he was with me all evening. After an hour of discussing literature I barely heard, I stood up to leave. "I'm sorry, ladies. I just remembered I have an early morning appointment. Daniel, would you mind following me home? I'm feeling a little nervous about night driving lately." Mrs. Patterson smiled. "That's so sweet. It's nice when children look out for their parents." The drive home was anticlimactic. I kept my speed low, avoided the lake road entirely, and arrived safely with Daniel right behind me. Patrick rushed out of the house looking genuinely surprised. "You're early. How was book club?" "Cut short, unfortunately. But Daniel offered to follow me home, which was sweet." "Very sweet," Patrick agreed. but I caught him glancing at my car with confusion. Actually, Daniel said, getting out of his car, I wanted to talk to both of you about something. What's that? Patrick asked. About the interesting video footage Mom got today. Patrick's face went carefully neutral. Video footage? From the camera she had installed under her car. The one that recorded you cutting her brake lines this afternoon. The color drained from Patrick's face. I have no idea what you're talking about. Really? Because the footage is very clear. Professional tools, careful cutting technique, approximately 15 minutes of work. Daniel pulled out his phone. Would you like to see it? This is ridiculous. I would never. Patrick. My voice was quiet but firm. We have you on video. We have bank records showing months of theft. We have witness testimony about conversations regarding my murder. What conversations? The one you had with Sabrina yesterday. About brake lines failing at 45 miles per hour. About insurance payouts. About her gambling debts. Patrick looked around desperately, as if searching for an escape route. You can't prove anything. We can prove everything. The police already have all the evidence. What police? The ones who've been watching your every move for the past week. I smiled calmly. Did you really think I'd discovered your plan and not take precautions? As if on cue, Detective Chen's car pulled into my driveway, followed by 2 patrol cars. Patrick Morrison, Detective Chen said as she approached. You're under arrest for attempted murder, elder financial abuse, and conspiracy to commit fraud. As they handcuffed him, Patrick looked at me with something like amazement. How long have you known? Long enough to make sure you'd never hurt anyone else. What about Sabrina? What about her? Did you think we'd forget about your co-conspirator? Detective Chen smiled grimly. We picked up Mrs. Chen an hour ago. Amazing how quickly people confess when they think their partner has already given them up. As they led Patrick away, I felt a profound sense of relief. The threat was over. My family was safe, and justice was being served. Mom, Daniel said quietly, I'm sorry I didn't believe you at first. You believed me when it mattered. That's what counts. What happens now? Now we heal, and we make sure this never happens to another family. 6 months later, I sat in a courtroom watching Patrick Morrison receive a sentence of 25 years for attempted murder and financial fraud. Sabrina had pled guilty to conspiracy charges and received 15 years. The court finds that the defendants engaged in a calculated plan to defraud and murder Mrs. Morrison for financial gain, the judge said. The evidence of premeditation and the vulnerability of the victim makes this among the most serious crimes this court has seen. Patrick showed no emotion as he was led away. Sabrina had sobbed through her entire trial, claiming she'd been desperate and made terrible choices. The jury had been unsympathetic. How does it feel? Daniel asked as we walked out of the courthouse. Like justice, not closure. I don't think there's really such a thing. But justice. I still can't believe I was married to someone who wanted to kill my mother. She was desperate and made terrible choices. But Daniel, that doesn't excuse what she did. I know. How do you trust your judgment again after something like this? Carefully. But you do trust it again, because the alternative is letting them win. Daniel had been seeing a therapist to work through the betrayal and manipulation. He was doing better, but I could see he was still cautious about everything. Mom, I've been thinking about what you said, about making sure this doesn't happen to other families. What about it? I think you should do it. Start some kind of consulting business. Help people protect themselves from financial predators. I'd been thinking the same thing. You think there's a market for that? After what we've been through? I think there are a lot of families who could use your help. Chen Family Protection Services? I like it, though maybe just Chen Protection Services. Sounds more professional. As we drove home, I found myself thinking about Daniel's suggestion. At 63, I could retire and spend my days reading and gardening. Or I could use what I'd learned to help other people avoid becoming victims. By the time I reached my house, I'd made my decision. Patrick and Sabrina had tried to destroy my family for money. Instead, they'd taught me skills that could protect other families from similar predators. Maybe it was time to put those skills to good use. 1 year after the trial, Chen Protection Services operated out of a small office downtown. My first client was Mrs. Rodriguez, a 70-year-old widow whose new boyfriend had been asking suspicious questions about her finances. He seems so caring, she told me during our consultation. But something feels off. Tell me about how you met. At the grocery store. He offered to help me load my bags. I made notes as she described their relationship. The pattern was familiar: chance meeting, rapid courtship, immediate concern for her safety, subtle financial questions. Has he suggested any changes to your banking or insurance? He thinks I should add him to my checking account for emergencies. And have you noticed changes in your social life? People you see less often? Actually, yes. He says my daughter worries too much, that I shouldn't let her stress me out with visits. Classic isolation tactics. I'd seen this pattern before. Mrs. Rodriguez, I'd like to run a background check on your friend. Is that really necessary? It's insurance. We're not assuming he's dishonest, we're just verifying that he's who he says he is. The background check revealed that Carlos Martinez was actually David Webb, a man with fraud convictions in 2 states. He specifically targeted elderly widows, gaining their trust before stealing their life savings. When I showed Mrs. Rodriguez the evidence, she cried with relief. I knew something was wrong, but I thought I was being paranoid. Trusting your instincts isn't paranoia. It's survival. Within 6 months, Chen Protection Services had helped 11 families avoid financial fraud, 3 families escape abusive relationships, and 1 family discover that their daughter's fiancé was already married. Each case reminded me why this work mattered. Patrick and Sabrina had tried to destroy my family, but instead they'd taught me how to protect other families. You're quite the private investigator, Daniel said one evening over dinner. I'm someone who refuses to let other people experience what we went through. Any regrets about not just retiring quietly? None. This feels like the most important work I've ever done. Daniel had started dating again, a teacher named Sarah, who'd undergone the most thorough background check in history before their first coffee date. She thinks you're amazing, by the way, Daniel said. Sarah wants to know if you'd consider teaching a self-defense class for seniors. Physical self-defense? Financial self-defense. How to spot scams, protect assets, recognize red flags in relationships. I liked the idea. Tell Sarah I'm interested. Really? Really? If we can teach people to protect themselves before they become victims, that's even better than helping them after the damage is done. As I planned my first financial protection workshop, I thought about how much had changed since that afternoon when I'd seen Patrick's car in Sabrina's driveway. I'd lost a husband and gained a purpose. Daniel had lost a wife and gained wisdom. And together, we'd learned that family means protecting each other from predators who see kindness as weakness. At 63, I was building something that would outlast both of us. A legacy of protection and justice that started with saving ourselves and expanded to saving others. Not a bad way to spend the rest of my life. 2 years after starting Chen Protection Services, I received a call that reminded me why this work was so important. Mrs. Morrison, this is Janet Patterson from Book Club. I think I need your help. Of course, Janet. What's going on? I've been dating someone for a few months. Robert. He's been wonderful, but lately he's been pushing me to invest in his business, $50,000. The pattern was depressingly familiar. I made an appointment to meet with her that afternoon. Janet's story followed the script I'd seen too many times. Charming man, chance meeting, rapid relationship progression, and now financial pressure. He says it's a sure thing, but I need to decide quickly, Janet explained. Something about the opportunity expiring. Janet, legitimate investment opportunities don't have artificial deadlines. That's a pressure tactic. But he seems so sincere. So did Patrick. Let me run a background check on Robert. The investigation revealed that Robert Thompson was actually Ronald Hayes, a man with a pattern of romance fraud across 3 states. He specialized in targeting book club members and church groups, places where trusting women gathered regularly. He's done this before, I told Janet. Multiple times. You're not his first target, and you won't be his last if we don't stop him. What should I do? Let me contact Detective Chen. This man needs to be arrested before he victimizes someone else. Within a week, Robert Ronald was in custody, and Janet had helped the police build a case by wearing a wire during their final conversation about the investment. I can't believe I almost gave him $50,000, Janet said after his arrest. You trusted someone who seemed trustworthy. That's not a character flaw. How do you do it? How do you trust anyone after what you've been through? Carefully. But I do trust people. I just verify what they tell me first. Trust, but verify? Exactly. and surround yourself with people who've earned that trust over time. As Chen Protection Services grew, I hired 2 additional investigators and expanded our services to include corporate background checks and asset protection planning. We'd helped over 50 families in 2 years, preventing millions of dollars in fraud. "Mom, you've built something amazing," Daniel said during our monthly dinner. He and Sarah were engaged now, planning a small wedding for the following spring. "We built something amazing. I couldn't have done this without your support." "What's next for Chen Protection Services?" "I'm thinking about franchising. There are a lot of communities that could use these services." "Franchising? That's a big step." So was surviving attempted murder. After that, business expansion seems pretty manageable. Daniel laughed. "You know what? You're right. After what we've been through, nothing seems impossible anymore." That's the point. Patrick and Sabrina tried to make us victims. Instead, they made us stronger. And they made us protectors. Exactly. Sometimes the worst things that happen to you become the foundation for the best things you end up doing. As I looked around my dining room, the same room where Patrick had planned my murder, I felt grateful for the strange way life works. The people who'd tried to destroy me had actually given me the most meaningful work of my life. At 65, I was just getting started. 5 years after Patrick's sentencing, I was teaching my monthly Financial Self-Defense for Seniors workshop when I received an urgent call from Detective Chen. "Mrs. Morrison, I have some news. Patrick Morrison died in prison yesterday. Heart attack." I excused myself from the workshop and stepped outside to process the information. "How do I feel about that?" I asked myself out loud. Honestly, relieved. Now I knew for certain he'd never hurt anyone else. "Mrs. Morrison?" Detective Chen was still on the line. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. What about Sabrina?" "Still serving her sentence. She'll be eligible for parole in 7 years. Thank you for letting me know." When I returned to the workshop, 25 seniors were eagerly discussing red flags in romantic relationships. Mrs. Chen, a different Chen, no relation, was sharing her story about almost being scammed by a fake military officer she'd met online. "The key thing," I told the group, "is that legitimate people don't pressure you into quick financial decisions. Love doesn't come with invoices." After the workshop, I drove home thinking about legacy. Patrick was dead, but the work he'd inadvertently inspired continued. Chen Protection Services now operated in 6 cities, with 15 investigators helping families protect themselves from financial predators. "How was the workshop?" Daniel asked when I got home. He and Sarah lived nearby now, and they often stopped by for dinner. "Good turnout. Mrs. Patterson brought 3 friends." "That's great. Any interesting cases this week?" "Actually, yes. We helped a family discover that their son's fiancée was already married to 2 other men in different states." "Bigamy?" "Serial bigamy. She was collecting marriage benefits while never actually divorcing anyone." Sarah shook her head. "How do people even think of these schemes? Desperation makes people creative. Unfortunately, it also makes them dangerous." "Speaking of dangerous," Daniel said, "have you thought about writing a book? About your experience? About what you've learned? A book? Think about it, Mom. Your story could help thousands of people recognize these patterns before they become victims. How I survived my murderous husband and built a business protecting others? Maybe a less dramatic title," Sarah suggested with a smile. "But yes, something like that." I considered the idea. A book could reach people Chen Protection Services couldn't physically help. It could teach the warning signs, the protection strategies, the importance of trusting your instincts. "You know what? I think I will write that book." "Really? Really? But first, I have something else to tell you both." "What?" "I'm thinking about retiring from the day-to-day operations of Chen Protection Services, promoting my senior investigator to managing director." "You're retiring?" Daniel looked concerned. "From investigations, yes, but not from the mission. I want to focus on education, workshops, the book, maybe some speaking engagements. Teaching people to protect themselves before they need protecting." "Exactly. Prevention is always better than cure." As we planned my transition from active investigation to education and advocacy, I thought about how far we'd all come. Daniel had learned to trust carefully, but completely. I'd learned that survival could become purpose, and together, we'd built something that would protect families long after we were gone. Patrick Morrison had tried to make me a victim. Instead, He'd made me a guardian. At 67, I was ready to take that guardianship to the next level. 10 years after that afternoon, when I'd seen Patrick's car in Sabrina's driveway, I was standing at a podium addressing 500 people at the National Conference on Elder Protection. My name is Vivian Chen, and I survived attempted murder by my husband and daughter-in-law, I began. But today, I'm not here to talk about being a victim. I'm here to talk about becoming a protector. The audience was attentive as I shared my story. The financial red flags, the overheard conversation, the brake line sabotage, and the investigation that brought them to justice. The most important lesson I learned, I concluded, is that predators count on shame and isolation to protect their schemes. They assume their victims will be too embarrassed to ask for help, too trusting to verify information, too polite to set boundaries. How do we change that? Asked a woman in the front row. We teach people that verification isn't suspicion, it's wisdom. We teach them that boundaries aren't mean, they're necessary. And we teach them that asking for help isn't weakness, it's intelligence. After my speech, dozens of people approached me with their own stories. Adult children worried about their parents, seniors who'd had close calls with scammers, law enforcement officers who wanted to learn better prevention strategies. "Mrs. Chen," said a young detective from Phoenix, "would you consider consulting on a case? We have an elderly victim who's being targeted, but she won't cooperate with our investigation." "What kind of targeting?" "Romance scam. She's sent $30,000 to a man she's never met, and he's asking for more." "I'll make some calls." Sometimes people will listen to someone who's been through it themselves. My book, Trust But Verify, A Widow's Guide to Financial Safety, had been published 6 months earlier and was already in its 3rd printing. The speaking engagements were keeping me busier than I'd ever been in retirement. Chen Protection Services, under new management, had expanded to 12 cities and helped over 300 families avoid financial fraud. Daniel had taken over as chairman of the board, ensuring the company's mission stayed true to its origins. "Mom, you've created something incredible," he told me over dinner that night. "Dad would be so proud of what you've built from such a terrible situation. Your father would be proud that we protected our family and then used that experience to protect other families." "Sabrina gets out next year," Sarah mentioned quietly. "Are you concerned about that?" I considered the question. Not really. She'll be 53 years old, with a felony record and no money. If she's smart, she'll disappear quietly and try to build a legitimate life. And if she's not smart, then she'll discover that I'm much better at this than I was 10 years ago. Daniel laughed. "I almost feel sorry for anyone who tries to scam you now." "Almost? Well, they deserve what they get." As we finished dinner, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me to this point. Patrick and Sabrina had intended to murder me for money. Instead, they'd created something much more valuable, a legacy of protection that would outlast all of us. My phone rang. The emergency line for Chen Protection Services. "Mrs. Chen? This is Maria Santos in Dallas. We have a situation here. Elderly man, 91 years old, has been convinced to sign over his house to a woman he met at church." "How long ago?" "The signing is scheduled for tomorrow morning." "Send me all the details." "I'll catch the first flight out." As I packed my overnight bag, Daniel shook his head in amazement. "You know, most people your age are playing bridge and taking cruises. Most people my age haven't learned what I've learned, which is that the best revenge against people who try to destroy you is refusing to let anyone else go through what you survived. So you're never really retiring from this work?" "Never. As long as there are predators targeting vulnerable people, there will be work to do. And as long as there's work to do, you'll be doing it? Someone has to. Might as well be someone who knows how this game is played." As I headed to the airport, I thought about the 91-year-old man in Dallas who was about to lose his house to a con artist. By tomorrow afternoon, if everything went according to plan, he'd still have his home and the con artist would be in jail. Patrick Morrison had tried to teach me that trust was dangerous. Instead, he'd taught me that protection was powerful. At 72, I was still learning new ways to use that power. And I was just getting started. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.